Facebook Live. We have a very special guest this time, Kay Bruner. She's an author, a counselor, former missionary with her husband in the South Pacific, east of Australia. She's a blogger. She's also a speaker. That's in addition to being a wife, and she has four grown children, which always great keeping up with the kids. She's written for the Covenant Eyes blog, and also helps answer questions for women who reach out to us on our blog. And you can check out her books and services by going to her website. It's her name, kaybruner.com, kaybruner.com. And we'll link to that website in our comment section as well, so that you can get to that and take advantage of the resources and services that she offers there. Kay, welcome, and thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. To help give perspective on what we're going to be talking about today, we're talking about how recovery for men specifically often doesn't stick. Oftentimes we'll see a little bit of victory, maybe for a few days, maybe a few weeks or months, and then there may be a relapse. There may be a time that we think, okay, we thought that this was a fix, and now it didn't. But to give us some of that perspective, and can you give us a brief story, I guess a Reader's Digest version of your story, and how that has helped you help other people too?
Yeah, so my husband and I went overseas. We're both missionary kids, so we kind of joined the family business, became missionaries, went overseas, and during our first term overseas, the internet sort of came to be. This is how old we are. Dinosaurs were roaming the earth and all sorts of things when we were young. But so we came home to the States, and my husband found internet pornography, and I was clueless, of course. So it went on for about 5 or 6 more years until I did discover it. And then, of course, probably everybody realizes that mission agencies take a dim view of these things. And also at the time, I think a lot of agencies felt that the way that you could help people would be to frighten them into not doing the bad thing that they didn't want you to do anymore. They were very, very firm about how they wanted to deal with that. And we ended up being removed from overseas in a very short span of time, brought back to the States, sent to counseling, which was also, I think at the time, they took a very addict and codependent sort of view. And I was told kind of on the front end that this was, I was involved. It was somehow, I was enabling it in some way, which I was just like, I remember saying to the person who told me this, well, please tell me what I did, because I will never do that again. I'll stop at this minute. I don't know what it is, but I don't want this. So that was not a helpful approach to take, and it, created a lot of unnecessary drama and difficulty for us in the middle of already a difficult situation. But in the middle of all that, my husband, Andy, he desperately did not want to continue looking at porn. And in fact, he had been praying, which a lot of guys tell us this, like I've been praying and praying that God would do something to stop this and take this desire away, or do something, because I'm stuck and I can't get out of this. And a lot of times the way God does that is not the way I personally would choose to deal with difficulty, but that's what happened. It all falls apart, and then that's actually a good thing. And so because he really, really wanted to get better, I think it, set us up for a difficult couple of years, but a really good progression toward actual recovery. And I remember I was reading a book by Henry Nouwen called Turn My Mourning into Dancing, when all of this kind of went down. I started to find out what had actually been going on in my marriage. And he's got a chapter in there about gratitude, and he says the call, as a Christian, the call to gratitude means that we learn to be grateful for everything, because God is using everything on the road to home. And I was like, this guy's an idiot. This is crazy talk. I'm not going to ever be grateful for this. This is awful. And about 1.5 years into our kind of our recovery, I remember Andy and I were talking one night, and I started weeping, because I said, he was right. I am grateful, because what came out of it for us was a relationship that we never had before, because we'd been, doing all the right things, but there wasn't a lot of really emotional heart to our relationship. And so what we discovered in the course of our recovery was this whole, other a way to be emotionally attached to one another that we had never really had before. And I always said, when I write my memoir about this, it's going to be called Pornography Saved My Marriage. But wiser heads prevailed. And I actually did write a book about it. Eventually, it's about 10 years after the fact. It's called As Soon As I Fell. And I chose that title because I've always thought, during that whole terrible time when I just felt like the sky had fallen, and I did not know how we were ever going to get out of that alive. As soon as I fell, love was right there for me and for my husband. And that kind of informs, how I think about recovery and how I talk about recovery because of the experience that we've had of that really deep emotional healing that neither one of us really even knew that we needed.
Wow, you've really said a lot there. I mean, there's so much we could go into. We could go into several of these just with organizations that that have difficulty dealing with people who are struggling with this. We have the issue of organizations and individuals believing that the woman has something to do with this, either totally or partially. And then mission work by itself, just being ripe for lack of support, lack of accountability, and being a situation, an outside environment that can lead to this. And that kind of leads me to our latest ebook, Hobbies and Habits, that we just released about a week and a half ago. I appreciate, Kay, you said you've already read this. We've had more than 13,000 people already download this and are benefiting from this. It talks about your outside environment. What kind of, do you have an open environment at your home, or is it more closed off? Is it dark? Just how you can change the outside environment and how that can lead to better accountability and better openness. So let's get to the real question and drill down here, Kay, for this time. I'm sure you dealt with it with your husband, and you see it in many other people's lives where people do want to get help. The man is genuinely apologetic. He genuinely doesn't want to do this anymore. And the wife's there to support him, obviously. She wants him to stop as well. But then you may see some victory, and all of a sudden there's a relapse, and then it happens again. And all of a sudden, probably both are thinking, I don't think this is even possible. I don't think this can stick. I don't know if I can have eventual victory in this. So let's dive right into it.
Yeah. So I think recovery is a process. So I do not believe that you're just going to be struck by lightning and it's going to all be fine for you. There's not a way to just wave a magic wand over this. So I do think that relapse is part of recovery. Like that, I know that's 12-step language there, which I think is actually pretty true. And, my husband and I have talked a ton about this over the years, and we continue to kind of talk about it, and he looks back and reflects on his, recovery process. And he would say, and I think this comes out of Michael John Cusick's book. What's that book called? Dang it.
It's okay.
You know the book I'm talking about. I surfing forgot that one.
There you go.
And he says in there that he thinks about 5 years for guys to like really, really, really be over it. My husband feels like that was pretty accurate for him, like where he came to a place where he just felt like, meh, I'm fine. Yeah, it's still there, but I don't have this compulsive need for it anymore. But I would say from my experience, in terms of our recovery together, I would say, that year and a half point, I felt like there was definitely this connection, this emotional connection between the two of us that made me feel very confident that regardless of, whether he still had some behavioral struggles, which he did, that there was this emotional connection between the two of us, that he was turning toward me instead of turning toward porn all the time. And that, I think, was a really big difference in him that I could feel. And then I was like, okay, all right, he had a relapse. Okay, he's still turning toward me. We're still working. It became much more of a we're working together kind of a thing.
And that's a big breakthrough, I think, in your relationship, because you were able to identify, okay, he's craving another type of emotional connection he was finding somewhere else and replacing it with something else. And then he eventually found that in you. How did you create that environment, and how did you change things so that he felt more comfortable coming to you when there was a problem?
Okay, Well, this is not a one-size-fits-all prescription, okay? But so I've told people this, and people are like, "This is dumb," but this is what works for us, and you adapt, fix it yourself. But I will say that there is research behind this. So John Gottman, who's like the foremost relationship marriage expert alive on earth today, he's got a number for everything, and his number, I think, for like time that you need to spend together on a weekly basis is something like 5 hours. So if you work that out, that's like 30, 45 minutes, an hour every day, which we never had done. Mm-hmm. And in fact, I would weep and say, "Please, can we just spend 10 minutes together?" And he would say to me, "What are we going to talk about?" I would go, "I don't know. I just want your attention." And he would go, "God, that's way too hard," because he's a real introvert. I'm an extrovert. So I think he felt very overloaded by my emotions and all sorts of stuff. But he figured out this thing that really, really works for him, and it's a bubble bath. And I was thinking about this last night, thinking about having this conversation today. And this is our big blow up happened in 2003. Now this is 2018. This is 15 years for us. We still had a bubble bath last night. Mm-hmm. We have a bubble bath every day. We have had a bubble bath every day for 15 years. And I swear that is what has you turn the corner for us, because there's going to be 30 to 45 minutes every single day where we are sitting together and we're just talking and we're just connecting. We know everything about each other. If we're upset about something, we know it. Something's going on at work, we know it. And my husband says, so I've asked him many times, why does the bubble bath work for him? And he says, one, nudity is involved. So that's a big selling point as far as he's concerned. Mm-hmm. And then he really likes the fact that you're not face to face, because I think for a lot of guys, if you're used to, if you watch how boys play versus how girls play, boys are used to playing side by side and girls do eye contact. And I think that eye contact can be really, really intimidating for men because they're not used to that. And so he in particular finds that, and it's true, if we'll go out for dinner and we're just like, crickets, because he finds that eye contact thing really hard. Yeah. So, but if we're sitting, and he doesn't have to do eye contact, that's way easier for him. And I think it's just, we have built this into our lives, and this is what we do. And
that is fantastic. That is a really neat, practical tip. And I hope it encourages people who are watching this and listening to this to think, okay, let's just find something that works for both of us. It doesn't have to be this. It can be a walk. It can be maybe anything. It can go for a drive. There can be something. Right. That is really neat. I really appreciate that. That's. And
I will say that when we first started it, we had some terrible fights. Like we would cuss, we would cry. The paint was practically peeled off the walls in our bathroom, but we needed to have those conversations. Mm-hmm. And the great thing about being naked and covered in bubbles is really hard to run away. Mm-hmm. Like it takes some planning to get out the door. So, you got to stay, you got to just sit there and take it. And honestly, I think that's something that men really need to learn how to do, is to sit with emotions, even really, really hard ones, especially the hard ones. Because I really do think, this is one of the main things I want to get to, is I think that one of the reasons we have failures in recovery with men is that we have told men from very early ages that, don't feel, don't have those, you don't have those feelings. Big boys don't cry. That's why we have these sort of cliche phrases that we say to men, be a man, all these things that we say from very early ages. And I think that, like we all know this, that porn is a thing where as a husband, you instead of turning toward your wife, you turn to porn. So you've got something going on in your life that's distressing. Porn's easy. Go there, and it's right in the palm of your hand, right? Yeah. So it's so easy to just turn to that. And as wives, we experience that. He's turning away, and a lot of times women don't even know that their husbands are looking at porn, but they know emotionally, he's really turned away from me, and I don't know what that is. Mm-hmm. But they experience that. He's turned away. And we want men to turn back toward their wives, and like as women, we long for that, and I think husbands want to do that too. But because we've done this to men in our culture from such early ages, we've actually trained men to turn against themselves, almost from the moment of birth. we talk to male babies differently than we talk to female babies.
That's true.
And we start so young teaching men to turn away from themselves. We turn away. I have 3 boys. I know I have done it. And that breaks my heart, you know, that I did that. I'm sure I did. Like, I hate that, but this is culturally, we have to be so intentional to stop what we do to boys. But I think, you know, we teach them to turn against themselves, and then, you know, and then we teach them, you know, we've taught them to deny and repress, you know, all of their emotions. And then we teach them it's inevitable they're going to act out. So boys will be boys, and locker room talk. Again, we have all this cliche language around what we expect from men, which I think is so painful for them and for everybody else. And, you know, it turns out that as a man, you know, if you feel bad, you've got 2 options. You can punch somebody or you can act out sexually. Those are pretty much the options that culture's going to allow you to have. And I just think we haven't done much better in the church, honestly, of attending to the way that God and Jesus are emotionally attentive, connected entities. We've taken all of this cultural stuff and read it into the Bible as though there's something holy about being a man with no emotional capacity. And then we say to men, oh, you have to now turn to your wife at a time when she's just devastated, you know, at the most difficult, painful point in her life. You now say to a man, oh, and by the way, now turn toward her. And it's just about impossible. And I think that, you know, this is why we end up with, you know, so much of our recovery practice pointed toward behavior, because it's easier for everybody to say to guys, hey, just don't do this, you know. But then the problem is either you'll go back and do it again because you haven't dealt with the underlying emotion that's there, or you'll just pick something else, you know, like you'll pick Netflix or gaming or, you know, something. You know, I know an awful lot of Christian men who are closet alcoholics, you know, because they got to do something with this emotion. And so I think the real kernel of true recovery is allowing men and encouraging men and supporting men to reconnect with themselves and to feel their pain and to sit with their pain and to be okay with their pain, and then to also be able to do that for their spouse. And I think when you can do that, they'll stick.
Yeah, that's great. And we talked a lot about the men, and I'm glad that we're challenging men here, because I challenge myself, because I'll think, okay, if I sit on the couch with my wife and we watch a TV program, I've just spent quality time with her. But she's like, no, we didn't even talk this time. So for guys, we feel like that's good enough, but it's not. For the women,
and I hope you understand that. Like, that comes from me, a place of utter compassion. You know, and that's not a blame or a shame, because I think that's the other thing that's very toxic, is that all the shame. We have so much shame in general around sexuality. And then men also have a great deal of shame around their emotions a lot of times. And so I hope that as I say those things, that compassion comes across. Like, I think there's very deep pain underneath this, and there's incredible healing, you know, that's totally available once you kind of get through all of that stuff.
Sure. One real quick thing, because our time is already, these 20 minutes go by so quickly. But one thing I wanted to just talk at least briefly on, and then if people have more questions, they can go to your website, kaybruner.com, or somehow reach out to you in another way. For the woman who's going through this, she's just found out her husband is struggling with pornography, and there's been some relapses. What do you recommend to them? Because I'm sure the temptation is to think, okay, he's going through this, I want to set a timeline. If he's not better by X time, or if you know, we're going to create this boundary, you're never doing this again. You know, how should she position herself with her husband when it comes to, you know, deadlines, timelines, ultimatums, and also how should she surround herself with other people?
Yeah. So I would say, for me, it's not a timeline thing, but it definitely is that issue of, you know, is he developing a capacity to turn toward you? I think that is the biggest marker for whether he's actually doing the work he needs to do or not, you know? So is he developing that capacity to turn toward you and to be present with you? And I will say, just from my own personal experience, once I knew that my husband was doing that, and once I saw that he was capable of doing that work, then I could go, okay, we are now in this together. It's not me versus him, me versus his behavior. It was, he's working on this. And I think if you don't get that, I think if you get a lot of, you should just get over this, it's not a big deal, you get a lot of excuses and rationalization and stuff like that, then, that's a pretty good marker for it's not going well. And you need to think about your boundaries. Now, I think what women need in recovery is they need a really good counselor who's used to working with things from a trauma perspective. Because I really think that's what women are experiencing. So many women will meet the clinical criteria for post-traumatic stress disorder, which is, we think of that for combat veterans. But, women will have that. And I have had women come in who have been through, couples counseling, which a lot of times this gets, sent to couples counseling. I don't think is the right treatment modality for this. I think men need to work on their stuff and women need trauma therapy. And then, if they're, then after you're kind of both stable, then okay, fine, if you want to go to a couples counselor, but you've got to get your feet under you individually, I think, before it's really a couples issue. Because the thing that I see happen with couples counseling is the guy maybe gets a lot of attention, especially on the behavioral side, and the woman gets no attention for her trauma in the interest of saving the marriage. And so I want women to go see somebody who has some experience with trauma and help them work through it from that perspective, and then help them think about what are healthy boundaries, how can you stay safe, how are things progressing, and help them to evaluate what's happening in terms of those other, is the marriage okay? So I think as a woman, you need somebody on your side to help you through that.
That's great. Kay, thank you so much for your time today. You're such a good friend of Covenant Eyes. We appreciate all you do for us. I want to encourage our viewers to download Hobbies and Habits. It'll be in our comment section. You can click on the link. Also go to kaybruner.com. You can check out her books as well if you're interested in finding out more about what we talked about today. Kay, thank you so much for joining us today. We'll see you next time.